This is James here with the Oracle Outlook for the week starting October the 7th, 2019. Thanks so much for tuning in and joining me for this week's video reading. This week I wanted to work with Lenormand, and specifically I wanted to work with a brand new deck in my collection. This was a deck that was a gift. It was a surprise gift, and I actually made my first ever deck walkthrough showcasing the deck. So if you haven't checked it out, I will be leaving that link in the description box below. So the deck is the Nosferatu Lenormand. It is based on an old 1922 actually black and white silent movie that was made in Germany, and it is about a vampire named Count Orlok. So the deck is actually a reference or an homage, if you will, to that particular movie, which is perfect because this is October and this is the month where we experience Halloween, those of us who participate in that. And so I thought, with that in mind, this was a perfect opportunity to pull out that deck. So once again, I'm working with Nosferatu Lenormand, and I will be leaving information about the deck in the description box below. So now that I've set things up, let's get to the table and take a closer look at what the Nosferatu Lenormand has to say about the week ahead. And here we are with the cards on the table, and before I get into shuffling the deck, I want to take a moment to show everyone the card backs. I realized that in my previous video, which was a walkthrough of this deck, that I did not show the backs of the cards. So these are the card backs. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and shuffle, and as I shuffle, I'm focusing on my intention for these weekly general readings, and that is for the information, for the insight, and for any guidance or advice that is going to be most helpful regarding the upcoming week. Alright, I'm feeling that's good. I'm going to go ahead now and cut the deck. And now I'm going to fan the cards out. Alright, and now I'm looking for 7 cards in the fan that are getting my attention. I'm continuing to work with Barbara's general spread that I started with last week. Only because I'm working with a Lenormand deck, I'm going to modify it just a tad more than I did the previous week. I'm looking for the final card now. Alright, so I have 7 cards. I'm going to take the remainder of the deck up. We'll move that to one side. Alright. Now I'm going to count the cards back. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Alright, so I have the correct number. So now I'm going to go ahead and lay them out. So if you're new here and you did not get to see me lay out Barbara's general spread, then the way it goes is that the first card goes at the very top, and it represents the general overview. So I'm going to consider this to be the general energy or theme of the week as a whole. And then typically Barbara's general spread consists of 3 cards. And so let me say this was a tarot spread, so it would be 3 tarot cards underneath the first card. But what I'm going to do this week is that because I'm working with Lenormand, I'm going to use 5 for the middle row, so I can do my standard line of 5. And so the middle row usually consists of cards that represent the situations that play into or contribute to the overall theme. I call these the things that we might experience. So these could be actual events that we might experience in the course of the week. And then the final card goes beneath the first card and the central card in the line. And this would represent a possible outcome, right? So this would be possibility of how any of these situations could play themselves out, right? But now with Lenormand, the interesting thing here that we could read all three of these cards in a vertical column to see if there's an additional message that they want to offer. So that's how I'm going to go about it. The first or the center card here for me is going to represent the heart of the line, just as I would as I was doing a line of 5, and then these might give us more information about that if we read them as a column. Okay, so now that I've explained how I'm going to potentially go about this week's reading, let's start by taking a look at the card that represents the general overview or the theme or the energy. And here we have Stork. So Stork is a card of change and improvement. Those are my keywords for that. So this could be a week where we're putting a lot of energy into changing things or improving things. And so, of course, the cards in the center row will give us more ideas or more possibilities as to what those changes or improvements are. But as the general theme or energy, this is about change and improvement. So now the only other thing I will say about the Stork card is that for me this is a person card in the deck, and this usually represents a woman. So this could be a woman who is maternal. I'm looking at the Stork, and the Stork looks like it is creating a nest, right? So the Queen of Hearts, which is usually the playing card association to this card, usually for me represents a loving, a caring, or a maternal figure. So again, this could represent change and improvement, but it could also represent something having to do with a woman, someone who's very loving, very caring, or someone who's maternal in nature. So that could be somebody who is a mom or somebody who's like mom, right? So that is the energy of Stork. And so now let's take a look at the line. I'm going to start with the card in the middle representing the heart of the line. And here we have Snake. Okay, so here a very interesting dynamic. So first thing is with Snake, Snake for me is a card that can represent a complication or something that is complex or something that's going to be a long and winding process. So if we go with the idea that Stork is talking about change or improvement, change and improvement of what? Of something that is complicated, right? Or that the change or improvements that we want to create or make or seek, they may be more complicated than we realize, right? That there's some level of complexity surrounding the change process, right? So now the other thing that caught my eye that I said was very interesting is that this is another face card in Lenormand typically, and this also represents a woman. This is the Queen of Clubs, so we have a dynamic possibly that involves two women, right? And the Queen of Clubs for me is connected to the Snake card, a woman who is maybe embroiled in some kind of entanglement. That's another meaning of the Snake card. Or that there may be some consequences to her actions that she needs to face or deal with. Because Snake is a card for me that represents consequences. But it could be that there's a woman who's at the heart, remember, or the center of some kind of scandal even possibly. Because for me, Snake is a card that can represent scandal. So she may figure into the scandal, or she may be a scandalous woman. Now, for me, tradition holds that the woman the Snake card is describing either has dark hair or wears glasses or both. She's considered to be very intelligent. So again, at the heart of the line, there is some sort of complication, entanglement, something that's a long and winding process, or something having to do with consequences. And there may be another woman who figures into the situation, or that she plays a central role or part, or that the issue centers around her. Right? And putting the card down, remember, if the energy is about change and improvement is either complicated. It reminds me that expression when people say, how are things going, and they say it's complicated, right? So it's either that the change or the improvement itself is complicated, or that it's going to lead to some complication, or there's going to be some sort of change or improvement regarding some kind of complication. And again, there may be two women who play a role or a part in the situation. One that may be more helpful than the other, going with the idea that snake is a challenging card, right? So that's how I would look at those two cards. And so now let's take a look at the surrounding cards when I do a line of 5. After I look at the heart of the line, I take a look to see what the possible factors on each side are. Okay, so first on the left, we have the ring card. So the ring card is about a commitment or an agreement. All right, so there is some sort of commitment or agreement that becomes complicated. And maybe that's where the change or improvement energy comes in with stork on top. For me, whenever I pull the ring card, I always say that this is an opportunity for us to honor our commitments and to keep our promises, going with the idea that ring for me can represent commitments and agreements and promises. Now, for some people, there may be something having to do with a contract, because ring is a card of marriage, and marriage is a contract. So if it's not marriage specifically, it may be more around something that's of a contractual nature. Right, so putting the card down, here we have the possibility here of a commitment or an agreement with a woman, or a commitment or agreement that becomes complicated, or that is complicated, and it may even be complicated because of another woman involved, right? Because the snake card is also known as the other woman, right? So we have the woman at the top with stork, but then we also have the other woman with snake, and so there may be something with that, right? So we may have a situation like a triangle with 3 people involved, right? If we go with this as a serious commitment or a committed relationship, and then we have someone else who may be involved, a third party. Right? And then if we go with the visual, if we go with this being 2 women, then one woman is on top of the other. She's needing to overcome this one. Usually for me, if this is a person card, just like it is here, usually what they're standing on is what they need to either understand or overcome. All right, or it's something of an emotional nature, so, or something that she needs to get control of, right? She needs to somehow get control of this situation, the Queen of Hearts for the stork card, right? And then vice versa, then this would be, something that the woman is thinking about, right? Because usually whatever's above her is what's on her mind, right? So there's something about 2 women. One is thinking about the other one, and maybe not in such nice ways, going with the idea that the snake card can represent venom, right, and poison. So now let's see what's on the other side of ring, mirroring this. And then we have lilies, yeah. So here we have lilies. For me, is a card that can represent the past, something old. It can also be a card of virtue. Now, we have an interesting dynamic here, that this card is also a face card, and for me, this is the King of spades. So we have a man here. So it's very interesting. We have 3 players in the game this week, right? And I'm saying that because Lenormand is also known as the game of hope, right? But we have 3 players in the game. We have the Queen of Hearts, we have the Queen of Clubs, and now we have the King of Spades. So it's very interesting. So we have maybe the possibility of a committed relationship between the man, mirroring the 2 cards, and then one of the women, and then we have the other woman. Right? So we definitely have a situation here. And this could be a long-term commitment, right? Because of the lilies being something that is mature or something that is old. Right? But it could also be an old agreement, you know, a past or old agreement. And it could also be, too, if there is some sort of complication, remember now, snake being a card that represents a problem, getting on the other side of it, we have peace, harmony, tranquility with the lilies. Those are all my meanings for lilies: peace, harmony, and tranquility, right? And that would be maybe the change aspect. We're trying to change the energy of it as it currently is and getting it on the other side of it because we want to have peace and harmony and tranquility. But the first thing that strikes me is that we have 3 people involved in a situation. So now let's take a look at the outer cards. Starting with the card on the far left, we have letter. So it's very interesting. So letter is a card that can represent documentation. It, for me, represents paperwork or documents. It's communication, but usually in written form. So with the ring card next to it, here we have, you know, paperwork or documentation of an agreement. This could be a marriage license or marriage, you know, papers having to do with a marriage. If it's not a contract, then it may actually be a marriage license or papers regarding a marriage or a commitment. Right? But letter in and of itself could just be asking us to pay attention to paperwork, documentations, especially if it's going to be of a contractual nature, making sure that we are reading all the details or all the terms in that commitment or that agreement, right? And why? Because snake is giving us a heads up so we don't run into some sort of complication. Or that there may be some changes needed to be made to some sort of written agreement or a contract or some sort of documentation. And again, because we don't want any entanglements going forward, right? You know, we don't want to suffer any consequences for not having read the details or being detail minded about what's in that paperwork or documentation. And again, you know, going with the idea that this is written correspondence or written communication, this could just be asking us to keep an eye on emails, text messages, things of that nature. And then let's now check out the card on the other side of the line. And we have anchor. Yeah, so here we have a card that represents work. So there may be something having to do with a working aspect, or work plays a role or a part in the situation. Another thing that's coming to me with anchor is that it can represent stability and security. Right, so if we are talking about snake bringing in the possibility of a complication, then anchor on the other side of that talks about stabilizing something or securing something, or holding something in place, right? Because anchors keep boats from moving, right? So it's about keeping something in place. But now if snake represents a long and winding process or something that becomes complex or complexity, then this card would suggest hard work needing to be taken in the process. For me, this represents hard work, serious work. This would imply like rolling up your sleeves and getting your hands dirty in order to get the task accomplished. But it also represents, a need to be serious about the situation. And it could also be that we are changing something. If I go back to the store card being about the overview of the energy or theme, we're talking about change and improvement. It may require or may lead to some kind of routine. For me, this card represents doing things routinely or work that's routine. It has a sense of predictability to it because it's so routine. And then another possibility, because I talked about Lenormand being the game of hope, the anchor is a card that represents hope, right? So if Snake is talking about a complication or a complexity, then this card is about having hope. So not giving up hope as we're working through it. But it's also about perseverance. So I see that as an encouraging sign about getting to the other side of whatever the challenge that Snake brings. That if we work hard enough, we can get, and if we're persistent enough, we can persevere. So that's what I'm seeing with anchor. And it's very interesting when I lay the card down. Next to lilies, we have peace, harmony, tranquility, and hope. Very aspirational qualities, right? We aspire for peace. We aspire for tranquility. We aspire towards hope. Right, and if we mirror the cards, and here we have the idea with lilies on one side, anchor on the other. This could be paperwork or documentation or written correspondence around work. And if this is about a contract, let's say, or some sort of written agreement, then this would be, at the end of it, it's about securing something, locking something in place, creating a sense of stability. But it makes me feel like to get to these, the peace, harmony, tranquility, and the hope, that we have to get beyond this. So there may be some sort of complexity or long and winding process or some sort of complication that comes up. But the cards that come after Snake are very positive. And with lilies too, this is a card that can represent, gaining some kind of wisdom. Right, so I tend to look at this as wisdom gained through an experience. We become older and wiser, going with the maturity aspect of lilies. But if there is a situation that involves three people, and the expression that just pops into my head is like third parties, right? There may be the need for a third party to kind of help two parties maybe who are having some sort of conflict with Snake, right? To help them work things out. That's what I'm seeing with the energy of the row or the line. So now let's take a look at the final card, rounding things out. This is the possible outcome card, and here we have the heart card. So the first thing that comes to me, going with the things that I was saying about a relationship. So now we have the rain card and the heart card. So there may be a commitment of an emotional nature, right? Or that there's going to be feelings involved, or that there's an underlying emotional undercurrent, going with the placement, right? I would look at this as an emotional undercurrent, right? Or underlying feelings and emotions, right? And since I have the card, I'll just lay it down. But with Snake above it, if we read this, here we have complication with what? With feelings, emotions, love. So this could be a complication in a romance. Here we would have a seriously committed relationship again, but also a marriage possibly. And then if we read the vertical, remember I said I would read the vertical. So here we have stork at the top. So we have change and improvement, becomes complicated in love and romance. Or change and improvement with a complication in love and romance. Right, but whatever is going on here, there may be an emotional undercurrent, underlying feelings that are playing a part in the situation, right? So there may be more of an emotional connection between the parties involved. It may not be so cut and dry as, a written contract or, a written agreement or something of that nature. There may be more feelings or emotions involved in it, based on maybe the relationships of the parties involved. And then we have another face card. I just realized the heart card is the Jack of Hearts. So here we have the Queen of Hearts with stork, and then the Jack of Hearts. So there may be something having to do with a child, because jacks for me can represent children. So here we have a woman and a child, possibly her child, because they're from the same suit. They're both hearts. And then this could be a child of either gender. I read jacks either gender, so it could be a male child or a female child. And if that's the case, it changes the dynamics. Right here we have maybe complication with a woman, a mother, and a child, her child. All right, and this is just coming to me. I'm looking at the visual and the way the snake coils. It kind of connects the two cards, right? But so there's a connection there between the two, and there may be something about words that are being spoken, because the snake card can represent, for me, it can represent deceit, because I go with the idea that snakes have forked tongues, and so for me that could represent deceit. Right, so there's two possible scenarios here. We may have a situation that involves three people, two women and a man. There may also be a child involved in that. Or that we have a situation that involves a woman, a maternal figure, and her child. And there's some sort of complication or entanglement between the two. And it may be a matter of the woman trying to get this situation under control. And it may be something that's been going on for some time, because of Lily's being about the past and something being old. And wanting to create change or improvement so that in the end there's stability and a sense of security that's been achieved, but it's going to probably require some work. And so on that note, I will go ahead and end this week's Oracle Outlook. I'm James Himm Mitchell, and I'd like to thank you for sharing space here with me for this week's reading, and I look forward to sharing the same space with you again in our next video reading together. So until then, I'm hoping that you have a wonderful day, and I'm hoping that you have the best of weeks, one in which we move beyond any complications, any complexities, any problems. Take care.